Good evening, everyone. Be no invocation this evening, but if you'd like to rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Call this meeting of the Elkins Common Council to order, and I will ask our stand-in clerk to call roll, please.
Councilor Bross-Fregonara, absent. Councilor Chenoweth. Here. Councilor Kwanzo.
Present.
Councilor Severino.
Here.
Councilor Guy.
Present.
Councilor Higgins, absent. Councilor Hinchman, absent. Councilor Lothar, absent. Councilor Parker.
Here.
And Councilor Vest.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. As you can see, we're a little bit low in numbers, and we've switched seats a little bit, so appreciate everybody bearing with us this evening. We have a few agenda adjustments that we'll get to later on. Is there anyone here for public comment this evening? Okay, hearing none, we'll move down to the minutes. Minutes proposed for the public hearing of July 26, 2022.
So moved.
We have a motion. Are there any questions or comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Minutes proposed for the public hearing of July 28, 2022.
I move the adoption of the minutes from July 28.
Okay, any questions or comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Minutes proposed for the special council meeting of July the 28th, 2022.
So moved.
The adoption of the minutes from July 28.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? All those in favor say aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Moving down to correspondence and notifications, you have in your packets the issued building permits, events, approved minutes of committees, boards, and commissions, and the treasurer's report. We will move down to committee reports. Councilor Chenoweth.
With respect to Personnel Committee, I have no report because we did not meet in August. Our next meeting in Personnel will be September 8th. With respect to the Special Hiring Committee to hire an operations manager, we had a meeting previously where we selected 6 candidates to interview. I think one of those candidates dropped out, but in the meantime, there were about 12 to 13 other applications that were submitted. So we had another meeting, considered those applications, picked 2 additional candidates to interview. So I think we're up to 7 candidates to interview. Those interviews are going to occur on August 24th here at City Hall. And I think one of those is via Zoom. We also are going to meet on Monday to go over interview questions for those candidates. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Guy, any report?
No report.
Councilor Severino?
No report.
Councilor Kwanzo?
Municipal Properties met on Wednesday, August the 17th, and we discussed several things under new business, which I believe our operations manager is going to address this evening, so I won't talk about it twice. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilor Vest?
Our ad hoc committee, excuse me, was canceled on the 16th because we didn't have enough quorum. The next meeting will possibly be the 3rd Tuesday of September, unless we have to have one before that.
Okay. Thank you. Councilor Parker?
For public safety, we basically at this last meeting just had reports from our chiefs and entertained a couple of other questions, but did not have any action items. For the task force on substance abuse and homelessness, we focused essentially on creating more formal structure, which we really need to have if we're going to be a viable candidate for any kind of funding to help support transitional living and our peers, to see to it that they can be properly compensated. So we focused on structural matters and we'll be working on MOUs with all of our community partners. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving down to staff reports. Chief Himes?
Good evening, everyone. Calls for July. We ran 70 calls in July. Nothing really out of the ordinary. Brought our annual total to date to 398. At the last council meeting, I spoke about obtaining some smoke alarms from the State Fire Marshal's office. Phase one, if you will, has been completed. To give you a little bit of a timeline, that Friday, which I believe was the 29th to the 30th of July, is when our notification through the website went live. Sutton was good enough to keep me informed on some of that interaction. I want to say within about a week or 5 days, with 13 or 1,800 views. Essentially, we installed between July 30th and August the 9th, every smoke alarm we were given from the fire marshal's office. 78 smoke alarms in 53 residences in the city and in the First Due area. We found 27 working alarms in those 53 homes, and effectively affected 113 residents or occupants. One great thing that did occur with that is we actually came across a lady that had some cochlear implants and had a hearing impairment, and one of those 78 alarms was actually a bed shaker alarm that was triggered by her freestanding smoke alarm, and then gave her a little bit of extra protection when she's sleeping. We were able to get another batch from the fire marshal's office. It has slowed down a bit, but I think we've probably put up about 15 or so in the last week. And requests are still coming in, and we are looking at other sources, resources locally and regionally to try to keep that program afloat with little to no cost to our operating budget or to the city. Anybody have any questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Ms. Judy?
Good evening. First off, I want to thank you all, and thank all members of council for taking up my reappointment at the last meeting and approving me for another term, so I do appreciate that. Does anybody have any questions on either the monthly report for July or any of the bank account information that's been provided in the treasurer's report? Okay, and if not, other things that we've been working on in our office, we're continuing to work with the accountant on our financial statements, the PSC sewer and water annual reports, which will be due by the end of September. And as you may remember, March 1st of 2023 is the deadline to be able to accept online payments for anything that the city bills for. I have contacted 5 different companies. One I have ruled out. They do not have a very good success rate, and reviews are very poor with them. I have another demo with West Virginia GoPay scheduled for August the 31st, and I'm waiting on a demo date for Tyler Payments, which is our current software that we use. I have watched a demo for Invoice Cloud and have been back and forth with them, so hopefully within the next 30 to 45 days, I'll have something to take to finance and then present to council. And that's all I have right now. Does anybody have any questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Himes?
several things on my list this evening. So as Councilor Kwanzo said, we just met for the Municipal Properties Committee met, and we discussed the Davis Avenue Bridge, the HVAC for City Hall, as well as the streetscape. So Jessica and I have been working with actually 3 different teams, and we are working through the process to get the firm's proposals. So as soon as we get all of those back and look through those, we can let everybody know about that. We recently are working on moving the recycling containers from 31 Jones Drive over to 11th Street. So thank Robbie for working with us on that, and we've been working with Sterling Daniels to get those over there. We think it'll be a better location, easier access. Folks can just take the rest of their recycling and drop every, yard waste and glass off there as well. However, we've gotten a call recently from the Clarksburg yard waste business that we need to be cautious about trash in the roll-off. So we just took it down yesterday, I believe, and they said there was a lot of trash boxes, bags, and if we don't control that, they're not gonna accept it anymore. So if you'll please just encourage folks, we don't have anybody standing by, but we're hopeful that when we move it over to 11th Street, we met there today, they may be able to monitor it a little better, but they just can't put all of that in the compost, and then they have to pick through it. So if you'll encourage folks we have a dumpster there to put all their trash in, and just throw the yard waste in the dumpster, please. Bulk pickups. We did start those bulk pickups, I guess, a couple of months ago, and we just met with the sanitation department. We've heard a lot of concerns from the public, and we're hopeful to kind of redo that schedule a little bit. I know we're gonna meet with Sutton, he checked in with me, to try to get it maybe like on the trash day, like the first of the month, like a Monday. The schedule's a little confusing, and folks are not putting things out, at the right time. So we are going to pick those up if they call, but we think that maybe we can work the schedule a little better. So we will make sure we get that information out before we start that. We did discuss also the sanitation garage in municipal properties. This has been in the works for several years, and so we've come up with a plan. Ms. Roberts is helping with that, and we have a plan to move forward to see what the best options are for that. If it's a new sanitation garage, or if we're just gonna try to stay in the current location. Now, the sanitation supervisor did say the current location is good for them, space, and there are some repairs that need to be made, so we're looking at getting an appraisal and contacting the owner of that property as well. We also discussed Sycamore Street parking and Gorman Avenue at the municipal properties meeting, which we'll have more information, I think, at the next council meeting for that. I'm also working with the leasees at the Darden House. There are a few concerns about the leases, but we're working on that to get that going, and Councilor Kwanzo and I are going to talk about that, as well as Ms. Roberts. So hopefully we'll get those signed soon. And I want to apologize to Carrie Kidd. I did not introduce her last time. I know Jessica mentioned her, and I had her on my mind, but I didn't. Carrie has been doing a great job. She's our new GIS tech, and she has been out and about meeting with folks, just going on her own to meet with folks. And she went over to meet at Region 7 with Stacy, their GIS tech, so she's really working hard, and we appreciate her. So just wanted to apologize to her for that. When I got back to work the next day, I said, I'm so sorry, but she said it's fine. So if you guys haven't met Carrie, I would encourage you to reach out to her, email her, or let me know, and we can link you guys up if you'd like to do that. I think that's about it. Well, there's a lot more, but I won't bore you. Do you guys have any questions about anything that's going on in operations? You may see the grader out soon. I know there are some concerns about potholes, and I know we've had a lot of rain, so the grader is going to be out and about for some alleyways. So if you'll let Shanna know if you have concerns about those, she can put those on the list. Okay? Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Chief Bennett?
Good evening. So for July, the Elkins Police Department responded to 687 calls for service, which generated 39 cases and 30 arrests, also issued 39 citations. Other things, on the 1st through the 5th, we conducted basic SWAT training for 7 agencies in the area, which was a 40-hour course. Our body-worn cameras were ordered on July 22nd, and we're looking at 14 to 16 weeks until they'll be on site. So I'm hoping around the 1st of November, we'll have those and be able to begin training and fielding them. I still have 2 vacancies in the department and 1 officer out on extended medical leave, so we're running a little bit shorthanded, but making it work. And also in the month of July, we were able to do 60 additional hours of specialized patrols through the Governor's Highway Safety Program. Those were DUI and speed patrols. And this month we're doing 30 to 35 hours of extra DUI patrol as well. That's all I have unless anybody has any questions.
Thank you. Next on our agenda is approval of vendor indoors. I'm sorry, Ms. Roberts, did you have a report? Over you.
Just one thing very quickly. On Monday, the application was submitted with the assistance of Region 7 for the DEP program, pilot program with regard to demolitions of properties. And I guess we'll just wait to hear. We were on the pre-approved list to be considered, so it's now in their hands.
Thank you. Now we'll go down to our vendor invoice payments for the period of July the 25th through August the 12th, 2022.
Motion to approve.
Any questions or comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Down to unfinished business, we have Resolution 1541, appointment of building inspector and code enforcement officer as city zoning officer.
So moved.
Any questions or comments?
I'm just curious, what are the credentials to be the zoning officer?
The zoning officer, there's no state standards in place for that. It's simply the council's responsibility to appoint someone to oversee that. With the adoption, potential adoption of the new zoning ordinance this evening, it requires that you identify a zoning officer. Historically, at least since in the time that I've been here, those duties have been kind of shared between the building inspector and the clerk. Just kind of depends on what it is that they're asking or who they contact first. But this new ordinance requires the appointment, but there's no certifications that go into that. It's a matter of just reading and applying the code.
I noticed the ordinance said the zoning officer or his or her designee. So is a designee typically the clerk? I guess if it's not the...
It could be, yeah.
Jessica and I spoke about that because we thought it would be a good idea that just in case the person that's appointed is unable to do something at that time, that you always have someone else available to assist if need be. So by having that designation, that gives you that opportunity to turn those duties over to someone else, even if it's for a temporary situation.
Thank you.
And that would just be for the zoning officer,
Yeah.
not for the other duties, building inspector, code enforcement duties. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Under new business, we have Ordinance 301, an ordinance of the Common Council of the City of Elkins, West Virginia, repealing the current Chapter 152 zoning, Elkins City Code, and other conflicting sections of the City Code, and enacting a new zoning ordinance to be designated as Chapter 152 zoning, Elkins City Code. This is the second and final reading.
So moved.
We have a motion. Are there any questions or comments? Sorry, go ahead.
It's my understanding there's a couple section references that aren't correct in that ordinance as we've adopted it. Can you explain that?
Yes, and the city attorney, I think, was going to speak to that.
So there,
Can you use your phone, Jerry?
came to our attention that there was just some misnumbering of sections, and you can imagine as many times as this document's gone over and added and changed and moved. So they weren't recognized until recently. So they are not substantive changes. There's no change in the text. It's just a matter of getting the right section number in front of something where it just wasn't picked up when the ordinance was put together. So in order to move forward on it, the only time you would have to start over a process like this is if there were substantive changes and they were being made at a reading. That is not the case here. These are just basically renumbering so the section numbers are correct and are in chronological order.
So hearing that, I'll make a motion to amend section 21-153, g in paren 4, to remove the reference to section 4 and change it to section 21-151.
You want to do those all in one motion or separate?
I can. I'll also make the same motion to amend section 21-153G5 to delete the reference to section 11 and change it to section 21-157, and also to amend section 21-153G6 to delete the reference to section 4 and change it to section 21-151.
Okay, so we have a motion to amend ordinance 301 on the floor. Are there any questions or comments about the motion to amend?
Is that along with passing of the code?
No, this is simply the motion to amend the ordinance to correct the numbering.
Okay.
Any questions or comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, motion to amend carries. There's still a motion on the floor to approve the ordinance as amended. Are there any additional questions or comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Moving down to Resolution 1558, approving full-time regular employee status and confirming compensation level for Jay Johnson.
I move the adoption of Resolution 1558.
Are there any questions or comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Resolution 1559, approving full-time regular employee status and confirming compensation level for C. Lloyd.
Motion to accept.
Are there any questions or comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Next on your agenda is RCDA funding request in support of Event Center project. We have Mr. Morris here this evening. I'll just mention that unless, Rob, if you want to speak to this for the Finance Committee, did recommend the approval of $400,000 to go towards the project to be split between this fiscal year and the next fiscal year. But I'll let Mr. Morris come up and speak to the project.
And those funds were to come from the rainy day fund.
Financial stabilization.
Financial stabilization. AKA.
Thank you, Robbie.
Is it the same thing?
Good evening. My name is Robbie Morris, Executive Director of the Randolph County Development Authority, here before you this evening to request financial assistance in support of the Finance Committee's recommendation to help fund the Rail Yard Event Center. When I was appearing before Finance Committee last week, I told you that we were anticipating the approval of a USEDA grant for $5.36 million to help construct a 16,000 square foot event center with an estimated price tag of $9.4 million. Proud to stand before you today and say that the Randolph County Development Authority Board of Directors met this morning and approved the grant agreement for that grant from the US EDA. So we do have that in hand, formal, approved. I can quit saying, I think we're going to get it, I'm pretty sure we're going to get it. I can now say we have it. So where we stand, funding, the Randolph County Commission has approved $250,000 towards that, the cost of the center, which we have in hand. The RCDA has also tentatively committed $250,000. I say tentatively because if we have to end up doing more, we can. And then a loan in the amount of $1 million is proposed at this point, which leaves a delta of $2.55 million. Now, should the full council approve the recommendation, that would leave a delta of $2.15 million, which that amount of money I have requested from the state of West Virginia and working with various cabinet secretaries and different agencies in Charleston to fund that $2.15 million through grant funding. It's a magic number because the way that the pro forma is working out, the center can handle $1 million of debt and still cash flow from day one without having to get, cut the scope of the project or get really, really creative in some form or fashion to make the center run. That leaves us with the proposed financing that we have now. That would leave us with very little money to pay, our insurance and things of that nature, or more importantly, build up a maintenance fund. However, I am confident that should we get the money from Charleston and what we have working right now with potential management companies for the facility, that we will be able to make the project successful. Through the application process, we have to obtain what are called beneficiary forms to support our project. And the beneficiary forms indicate a business or organization that would benefit either directly or indirectly from the project, the main project focus, in this case, the event center. And as you can imagine, there are a lot of businesses and organizations that would benefit from a successful center like this, but they don't need every single one. They need the best that you have and ones that make the most sense. So we received approximately 10 beneficiary forms, and from those, jobs created, businesses saying if this were to happen, we would create this many jobs, was 87, with 66 of those coming from the facility itself. 13 jobs retained. Those jobs were, as far as retention, were explained in the manner of, in the winter months, not a lot to do in Elkins. So restaurants, hotels, the train, tend to lay people off because there's nothing to bring tourists into town or as much activity. They would be able to, they are anticipating being able to retain those employees because there would be events and conferences and meetings and things that would be going on that could still bring people to town. Total private investment over a 9-year period for that is anticipated to be $22 million, with the bulk of that coming by way of payroll for those jobs. Rough schedule that we have outlined, depending upon the decision here tonight and also decision coming out of Charleston. We have roughly 75%, I would say, of the design done. We've gone through 2 revisions. I'm saving the third revision for when we have the funding, number 1, and number 2, when we have a management company on board, because I want all interested parties to have a final say in the design, functionality, logistical use of the facility to make sure we build it right the first time and don't have regrets right after we cut the ribbon of, I wish this was bigger, or I wish that was there. All operating partners I want to have in that design. So we expect that process to take a month, month and a half. Then once we have the final design, the engineer will create the construction packet, including blueprints and everything else, to put the project out to bid the first of the year. Approximate month to a month and a half bidding process, depending upon how complicated the build ends up being. About a month to evaluate that, and then hopefully have construction as soon as the weather breaks, or April, May. Talking about the engineers anticipate a 14-month construction time period. Let's be honest, weather, all that sort of stuff, probably I would factor in 18 months of construction, so sometime mid-2024 having the center open and operating. This project was on the RCDA strategic plan that we approved the first week of March 2020. Got shelved for a little bit. There were a couple things going on that we weren't sure how event centers and indoor facilities would function. But once we realized that things would eventually get back to normal, we began the design process, hired an engineer, and we had stakeholder meetings from various entities that could operate the facility, that would use the facility, that could partner with the facility, or that operate similar or related type entities that could help us in the design. And that's where we came up with the two revisions to a design that would get us an engineer's estimate for the project. Originally, when the project was applied for, it was an $8.2 million project. I know everyone in this room is very well aware of inflationary issues that are hitting everything right now, especially construction type projects. So before I started asking for funding, and I knew that the USEDA grant was looking positive, I had the engineers do a revision just to check, and they were halfway through roughly construction season at that time. Where had bids come in, where were prices looking, and so forth. And the 8.2 went up to 9.4. So, bad obviously from that perspective, but good in the sense that the state and the economic development funding that they have available through the governor's office and through the Water Development Fund, they have appropriated funds for projects such as this, where matching federal grants with all the additional federal money coming in, as well as inflationary problems that have been caused to construction projects. So in a weird way, it actually helps because it makes us eligible for some of those funds. So as you'll see in the breakdown, we have some contingency in there. To be honest, we're probably going to have to use that contingency, potentially a little more, but should things get better by the time we actually break ground, and we don't, just for your knowledge, we would, any leftover funding, we would first look to establish a depreciation/maintenance fund for the building. While we wouldn't anticipate any significant costs for a number of years, we have to start saving for that now, because anything major that would need to be replaced on this facility would be costly. But at the end of the day, should different funding entities like the state, the city, the county, should you want a prorated share of refund if we do have a very successful construction project, we'd be happy to talk about that with you at that time. We would also look for those funds to also buy down any debt that we would potentially need to incur for the project. One question that did come up during the Finance Committee was what is the intention as far as ownership of the building? And the intention of the RCDA is to own this building in perpetuity. However, we are required to own it for a minimum of 20 years per the USEDA grant. So we have it for a minimum of 20 years, and I would say longer than that. So with that, I will open the floor up to any questions.
Where is it going to be built?
So if basically on the if you have the depot to your back and you're looking out at Town Square, be straight ahead would be the facility, and then part of the facility and parking and the Roundhouse Plaza would be to your left heading south. The end of the parking lot would go just past the current footprint of the turntable pad. So there is a plaza that is conceptualized in this. We do not have the funding for that now, but there are a lot of transportation enhancement type grants that we think the plaza would be eligible for and intend to apply for once we get the building taken care of. It would just be a grass area for right now until we could get the funding. But the plaza would set roughly where the current turntable pit is. And in agreement we have with the State Historic Preservation Office, that would be a round plaza with interpretive signage that would commemorate the roundhouse and the turntable that was there previously. The theater, just to talk about the center, 16,000 square feet, roughly split in half. Half would be a 375-ish seat theater, similar to American Mountain Theater, now the Summit Church building, and other theaters like that, in consultation with various events and tourism professionals and so forth, looking at what type of facility do we need. We didn't want to duplicate anything that we had. We wanted to fill in gaps. And when you look at the bus traffic and so forth, even at the peak of the American Mountain Theater success and what the Gandy Dancer has going on right now, if they have 3 or 4 buses, in one evening, that's a really great evening. But those buses handle on average 40, 50 at most individuals. So you're looking at, on a great night, 200 people per show. If you have that, 200 people at Harper McNeely, for example, seems like it's not a success. 200 people in a 350 to 400 seat theater makes it seem is a lot more practical. We still have Harper McNeely if we want, larger concerts and things of that nature. The conference center would be able to hold approximately 500 individuals comfortably, set up for event style layout. So that also seems, for right now, if you think about an event of that size, which if you talk to the CVB and the chamber and so forth, where those kinds of requests for information come in from various organizations, we just don't have anything that can accommodate a group of that size. And usually conferences or conventions like that also have other requirements within walking distance or within a short drive, easy drive of hotels and restaurants and other things like that make it attractive for the participants of the conference or convention to be here. Obviously, the rail yard fits all of that. So we would open ourselves up to a market that we currently don't have facilities to accommodate.
What kind of conferences here would you imagine?
So throughout this process, I've been trying to hit up the Secretary of Tourism to have the Governor's Conference on Tourism. I'm chairman of the West Virginia Economic Development Council, for example. Would love to bid on this, but the closest we've been able to bid for this region has been Canaan Valley. So, municipal leagues, county commissioners associations, CPAs, bar meetings, all kinds of different organizations that have several hundred people that attend their annual meetings. We'd be able to have that. Also, some of the bus groups that come in, they're part of a larger get-together. They want to ride the train, see a show at Gandy Dancer or something of that nature, but there's not really a place for them to have larger events that, again, meet their needs. So that would also be an option.
Robbie, has Taylor I'm assuming they have done a feasibility study on this.
So we did not, with the timing that we had, with everything, we did not commission a formal feasibility study. However, we have information from, we're given information from other similar businesses, either currently or formerly in business, as far as looking at revenue projections. We have CVB data as far as, the number of requests they have and the types of meetings that we have. Also talking with some of the other tourist attractions about things that would, benefit them, looking at how to put a show back together similar to what we have or have had. So we kind of saved the $50,000 to $75,000 to do a feasibility study and put our own information together. And it was very well done because we got the US EDA grant because they needed a lot of information. Their big question was we can build the building, how do you operate it? And and so the information that we were able to provide obviously proved successful. I would also note we asked for $5 million and received 5.36, so I think we have a good plan in place.
Where would you house all the people that would come there?
So, I mean, with just a stone's throw, you have two hotels currently. You'll have three online with the Tiger, the Holiday Inn Express, and the Wingate Isaac Jackson. You have the Hampton Inn, you have the Super 8, you have the Elkins Inn and Suite. So you have quite a few hotel options, but we've also had come across my desk without this center, no knowledge of this center coming. We have other interest from other hotels. I think with this center, that will probably ensure we get another hotel. But, we're not talking about having, this isn't going to be a convention center like you see in Pittsburgh or anything of that nature, hosting thousands of people that we couldn't have. You're talking about hundreds, and, we have quite a few offerings, but hopefully this also drives the demand up for more.
I have one more question.
Yes, ma'am.
Nobody else does. Tracy, can you help us out with the stabilization fund, how that looks?
Sure. So in the treasurer's report, as the end of July, there was 1.187 million in there. And if you recall, there was a state-approved budget revision to move funds, some carryover funds into that. So right now, we're at 1.392 million. And I believe the conversation, and Mr. Chenoweth, correct me if I'm wrong, was we would take the initial 200,000 out of financial stabilization, see where we are at the end of the year. If we have excess funds, potentially use that or take it out of the financial stabilization account.
On that note, I want to, and this is not meant to poo-poo the project. This is just for clarification for our citizens, really. There's concern about the pending water rate increase. This conversation could very easily be misunderstood as involving funds that could otherwise be put to reducing that water rate increase. We're going to need to make sure that folks have every opportunity to understand clearly that we have two absolutely distinct revenue sources and budgets that by law have to be kept separate. And it will be incumbent upon us in any and all of our decision-making, whether it's this project or anything else that we do, to help folks understand the very discrete nature of those two funds and those two operations. And I'm bringing this up in part tonight because we may have folks who are watching on the internet, and so that they don't think, well, they're going to pop us for 33%, and then we're going to put all this money into an event center. That would get people upset for no good reason. So, but it will be incumbent upon us as a council to be sure that our folks understand the distinct nature of these two funds and these two kinds of operations. Thank you.
Absolutely, and if I can add on that, I don't think council should look at this as just spending money. I think this should be viewed as making an investment. The event center would absolutely have a return on investment for the city of Elkins, number one, through sales tax, through hotel motel tax, B&O tax, and a lot of that coming from individuals who live outside of the area, coming here, having a venue in which to spend their money, having a venue that can hopefully, instead of a one-night stay, turn into a two-night stay, instead of 3 meals, turn into 4 meals or 5 meals, and be able to recoup the money that you are investing in this center. So while it obviously is spending money out of the coffers today, short-term issue, long-term, we fully expect there to be a significant return on investment for the city and the community as a whole.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'll ask you the same question that I asked you at the finance
Yes.
meeting. A criticism may be that we have the Phil Gaynor Center, and it's a large building that houses events. how's that different than what you were proposing here?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear what you said, Rob.
Take my mask down. I said at the Finance Committee, I asked Robbie to explain how this event center is different than the Phil Gaynor Community Center, because I would expect the criticism may be that we have a large building that, conducts events, so how's this different from that?
Yeah, and it's a great question. So the Phil Gaynor Center is a phenomenal community asset, and I applaud the city for investing in that project. And actually, the RCDA was a partner with the city of Elkins back when the National Guard was looking at disposing of that facility, and helped to facilitate the engineering report and so forth on the status of the building and uses and so forth. So this facility would be, take the theater, for example. While there have been concerts and so forth in that facility, it's not really conducive to a stable, consistent, ticket-selling type auditorium. So we don't have that ability within the Phil Gaynor Center. Also, the Phil has been, as it's been upgraded, it's been a lot more of athletic and sports-related activities have been incorporated with, the basketball hoops and things of that nature. So for planning events and decorating, which the Phil, to have any kind of a formal event or something of that nature, takes a lot of decorating and things of that nature. The other thing with this, as far as a conference were to go, you can have essentially one meeting in there at a time. This conference center is 500 people is when all the partitions are removed and it's one big room. But if you've been to the Marriott in Charleston or the Embassy Suites in Charleston, those conference rooms, they have 4, 5, 6 meetings going on at one time. You can combine 2 rooms to fit 150 people, or you can break it all as small as it'll go, room that can hold 50. So it's more flexible, multifunctional for that specific purpose. Another question that I've had is, what about the new Miles Center at Davis and Elkins College? And while that is a fantastic facility, and thank Jean Miles for her investment, it is primarily on a college campus. 9 months out of the year is utilized for student functions.